Good morning, everyone. My name is Tevin. I'm the Kickstart executive here at Pathways CTM. I'll be facilitating all the sessions today. Just before passing on to Alan and Ben, I'd like to turn your attention to our Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any burning questions you'd like to get through, I'll be sure to raise it during the presentation. Otherwise, at the end, you'll have a few minutes to ask any questions you'd like to know. So without further ado, Alan, Ben, take it away.
Thanks very much. Morning, everybody. We have a presentation which I think will last around about 25 minutes or so. And as mentioned, if you have any queries along the way, do raise them, or otherwise we can discuss them at the end. But by way of a quick introduction, my name is Ben. I'm a senior director at a company called Lichfields. We're a town planning consultancy. I'm joined by my colleague Alan, who's an associate at Lichfields. As you may know, we're working with the London Borough of Brent on the regeneration of South Kilburn, and we've been asked to speak to you this morning about our company and our profession, town planning consultancy, and the development industry, and particularly how English and how studying English is of relevance to what we do, and how we use English and written communication in particular within the company in terms of our role in development projects, progressing planning applications. So could you move on to the next one, Alan? And I'll just...
Certainly can, yeah. Good morning, everyone.
There we go. Thanks. So in terms of the discussion, the lesson structure, it's more of a presentation structure really this morning, but Alan will start with a brief introduction to the world of town planning and what we do, and an overview of our company Lichfields. We'll then talk through our respective career pathways briefly, so what we studied at school and A-level, our degrees, and how we arrived at the company. We'll then talk you through what we and the wider team are doing with Brent Council at South Kilburn, the wider regeneration project. And then I'll talk through what you could expect in the profession of town planning, and how your academic work, and particularly English, is so important and so vital to what we do. And then, as mentioned, we'll have 5 or 10 minutes at the end for a Q&A session. So Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, so what is town planning? It's this is a question I get asked every week, so I probably should have quite a good answer to it by now. But I must admit, I used a definition I found online that suited it perfectly. But having been a town planner for 10 years, this is pretty accurate. So, town planning is a profession that decides how land should be used or protected. So since 1947, planning has helped tackle climate change, social justice, and public health. Planners organise, design, and make decisions on where new homes go, where roads go, schools, shops, and all of those other things that we need to live and work on a daily basis. At the same time, town planners try to make towns, cities, and countryside attractive for everybody to use. We also make sure they're safe and environmentally friendly. We are, as town planners, at the heart of discussions with local communities, like here in South Kilburn, with local businesses and with local politicians. So planning can be quite a technical process, but it touches people's lives every day, because it is effectively everything that is all around us, whether that be natural or built form. Town planning, you need to be able to speak and write and have conversations in ways that make it accessible to everyone. So in that vein, how is studying English useful in a career for town planning? Very, very simple. English as written communication is absolutely critical to everything we do day to day. We need to write simply and clearly. We have to make quite complex issues and discussions easy to understand and accessible for everyone. With the help of architects and designers who might prepare drawings or images or CGIs, we have to put the words to those. We have to make them easy to understand and yeah, make them easy to understand for everyone. English is important to our daily work as it involves a lot of written communication, whether that be typically a lot of emails day to day. We used to write a lot of letters, but that's not quite as common anymore. And as well as that, a lot of reports and assessment writing. So that skill of being able to write clearly and succinctly in English is a really important skill. Just as important as written is obviously that English is a language. So being able to speak plainly, speak clearly, making sure that English we can use in a very clear and simple way when we engage with communities about projects, about proposals for new developments, and making sure that we've clearly explained what's going on before development happens. So a little bit more about Lichfields. Lichfields was formed in 1962, so it's our 60th anniversary next year. We're at the forefront of planning, design and economics with around 200 staff across the country. I think 9 offices in total now. And I suppose in terms of how we use English at Lichfields specifically, so I started, we'll come on to this, I started as a graduate in 2011, but a very important part of the sort of Lichfields approach is encouraging all of our staff to be clear and simple in everything that they write. We train our graduates in report writing. We explain how they should structure letters, how should they structure emails and reports. It is all about effective communication, and English is the way we do that. So clear introductions, focused sections on specific topics, using executive summaries and conclusions. It really is a skill that's always useful and one that you can continue to improve upon throughout your career, as myself and Ben can attest to. And I suppose just to conclude this introductory section, town planning actually has one of the highest employability ratings in the country. And again, Ben will attest to this. We're always looking for new staff and staff that have very strong written English skills. So it very is an important part of what we look for in the profession. So just moving on to career pathway. As Ben mentioned, I'm an associate director in Lichfield's London office. And in terms of my pathway, I obviously primary school followed by secondary school. I grew up in the northwest of England, so I went to secondary school on the Wirral, which is not too far from Liverpool. My GCSEs included English language, English literature, geography, design and technology. And then at A-level, I maintained geography, also maintained design and technology, but also chose to do a couple of slightly different A-levels, so general studies, and then a course that's very poignant to the way planning operates in this country is British government and politics, which I think at the time a few people asked me, why on earth am I doing British government and politics? But it was something that interested me. And yeah, it's quite a key aspect of how planning works in this country, as all of the decisions that are made on planning applications, what should be built where, they're made in a democratic way by the politicians that are elected. So I was always interested in the world around me, the countryside, buildings, and how humans interact with the environment. This is effectively what planning is. So after school, I attended University of Liverpool. I spent 4 years there studying town and regional planning with a specialism in urban regeneration and policy analysis. And then my first job out of university was at Cheshire West and Chester Council. So similar to the London Borough of Brent, they're a local council in the Northwest, where I spent a year working in their regeneration department. So we'd work on local projects, trying to improve and regenerate one of the sort of former oil towns on the banks of the River Mersey called Asmuir Port. After a year there, I joined Lichfields as a graduate, as mentioned. So in the London office, that was 2011, where I trained and qualified as a town planner, later becoming a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. 4 years later, I spent a shorter stint at DP9, similar company to Lichfields, but with a sort of a focus on central London. So if many of you sort of walked around Westminster or the City of London, a lot of those new tall buildings are the type of work that DP9 did as a town planning consultancy, again, similar to Lichfields. And then last year I returned to Lichfields after after that break. So I've come back into Ben's team, working with about 25 other planners in our London housing and residential team. Ben, shall I hand over to you just to talk through your career path?
Yes. So my career started a little bit earlier than Alan's. It's been interesting thinking about how sort of things started for me so many years ago. But like Alan, obviously I studied GCSEs and A-levels back at school in a remote part of rural England in Lincolnshire. So my A-levels included geography, biology, maths and general studies. I then moved down to London to university to study environmental geography as an undergraduate for 3 years at University College London. And as part of that undergraduate course, I recall an important early module which we were all required to do, which was all about written communication and academic writing. And the lecturers really sort of impressed upon us the importance of clear, concise, focused written English, brevity and short sentences. And I think that's something that's always stayed with me. And it was during the second year, possibly early in the third year of my undergraduate degree, that I developed an interest in town planning and urban planning. I've always been interested in London and interested in the growth and development of the city. And as part of the degree course, we studied urban development and spatial patterns of development, which I found really interesting. And that in turn led me then to do a postgraduate degree called an MPhil in town planning and urban design at the Bartlett, which is the UCL School of Architecture and the Built Environment. And then like Alan, started working at Lichfield as a graduate, probably about 18 or so years ago, learning the ropes with the company, becoming a Royal Town Planning Institute member, and then progressively working my way up through the company over the years. And as Alan mentioned, I, along with a couple of other senior directors now, lead the housing team at Lichfield. So we work on a lot of the large regeneration projects and housing projects across London, and South Kilburn is a typical project for us, one of the biggest projects we're working on, one of the most interesting that we're doing at the moment. And we'll move on to the next slide, Alan, and I'll tell you a bit about our role at South Kilburn and what's happening in your neighbourhood. So I think across London, really over the last 5 years, possibly 10 years, there's been a real growth in what we call estate regeneration or estate transformation developments, in which local authorities, councils, and sometimes housing associations embark on large phased regeneration of major estates. And the aim of these projects is to enhance housing, to provide more housing, to create better areas of open space, and to provide other community facilities. And South Kilburn is probably one of the largest, one of the most high profile projects happening in London at the moment. As mentioned, it's being led by Brent Council, who are effectively the landowner and the landlord at the estate. As you can see from the slide, it's a long-term project, as these sorts of developments tend to be. So it has a 15-year timeframe, a 15-year trajectory, and the aim is to build around about 2,500 new homes, of which half of those will be affordable housing. It will also create improvements to the area's open spaces and the public realm, and provide new community facilities like healthcare facilities and education facilities alongside new shops. And the overall project is, certainly in terms of the planning process, around halfway through the overall programme. Alan and I at the moment are currently working with the council on phase 6, which is the Crone, Craken and Zangwill site, and that development, that phase, will deliver 250 new homes. So our role on the project as planning consultants is really to work with the project architects, PTE, and the wider team of consultants and advisors to design a development which is acceptable to the residents, is supported and acceptable to the council's planning team, and really capitalises on the opportunities at the estate and in the area, as I've said, to build new homes, better homes, to provide new open spaces and new community facilities, and ultimately to improve the overall environment in the area. So the council has what's called a supplementary planning document, or a master plan for South Kilburn, which provides guidance and policy and acts as a framework or a structure for the development. So we're working within that framework to develop the scheme. At the moment, we're at what's called the pre-application stage. So we're having regular meetings with the council's planning team and design and housing officers to make sure they inform the development and they're supportive of the proposals before we then submit a planning application later this year for the redevelopment. That application will then be considered by the council, and residents and stakeholders and other consultees will have a chance to comment on the application, and it will then be considered by the council's planning committee, who'll decide whether to approve or refuse the application. Then once the application is hopefully approved, there'll be some planning conditions which deal with detailed aspects of the project, which then need to be agreed with the council, and then it can be built on site, and each phase is likely to take around 2 years to construct. So our role really is involved with navigating the project through these discussions with Brent and the Mayor of London and the GLA at the moment. We'll then coordinate the planning application for the site and help the council secure the permission to allow the development to be built and to allow these benefits and these opportunities at South Kilburn to be capitalised on. So Alan, can we move on to the next one? And then in terms of the final slide, really, what to expect as a planner. There's quite a lot of text on that slide, but I'll try to be succinct and summarise the key points. But really, this slide just sets out what you could expect if you're interested in pursuing a career in planning like Alan and myself. So in terms of the skills needed, so much of what we do is about effective written communication and verbal communication, but also report writing. We typically work on a good range of different scales of projects and types of projects. So really an ability to sort of balance and juggle different projects and manage time effectively is important. On projects like South Kilburn, large complicated developments, we work with architects, clients, and a team of probably around about 15 to 20 other companies, other advisors and consultancies. So effective team working and communication and briefing is really important as well. And then an ability to analyse lots of different, often competing issues and solve problems is also vital. In terms of qualifications, we've talked about our career pathway ourselves. To become a chartered town planner like Alan and myself, you need a university degree that's accredited by the RTPI. There's no set degree needed to study planning. I studied, as mentioned, environmental geography. Other people study urban studies, spatial planning, or environmental studies. And then you can carry out a postgraduate degree in town planning. As mentioned, I did an MPhil at the Bartlett School of Architecture and the Built Environment at University College London myself. So there are a variety of different routes to a career in planning, built upon good GCSEs, A-levels, and a university degree. In terms of responsibilities, as mentioned, so much of what we do involves teamwork. So interacting with clients and colleagues and planning officers, advising on policy. So planning process is very much led by policy and guidance. So in this case, Brent has a local plan. The Mayor of London has the London plan, which sets out strategic policy. And then in South Kilburn, there's supplementary planning guidance, a supplementary planning document. So everything we do is structured around those policy requirements. We then prepare and submit planning applications and sometimes appeals as well. We attend regular meetings with clients and with planning officers. on a weekly basis on projects. We work with a variety of different consultants and architects. So part of our role is overseeing their work and advising them on drawings, illustrations, design statements and technical reports that they provide. And then we write some of those technical reports ourselves. So every planning application is supported by a clear, comprehensive, robust planning statement, which assesses the development in the context of that policy framework that I've mentioned. And then finally, in terms of potential employers and jobs, I think there's basically 4 groups of potential employers. So you could work for a local government, like Brent Council as a planning officer. Like Alan and I, you could work as a private consultant, helping developers and councils and architects with planning applications. You could work for a developer itself, so a house builder, a commercial developer, a housing association who have in-house development and planning teams. You could work for the government, so at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, MHCLG, the Planning Inspectorate who determine appeals, and then, as I've mentioned, there's the Mayor of London and the GLA who deal with strategic planning applications and strategic planning issues and produce their own strategic policy to guide development of strategic London-wide importance. So there's a variety of different potential employers. I would say most people who carry out a planning course at university and want to become a planner end up either working for local authorities as a planning officer, or work like Alan and myself for a private town planning consultancy like Lichfields. So I think that's the last one, Alan, unless you've got anything else to add. Hopefully we've managed to stick to our allotted time, and very happy to answer any questions you might have, unless you've got anything to add, Alan.
No, nothing further, Ben, from me. I suppose just to conclude, where you see the sort of skills and responsibilities here on this slide, that English obviously goes to the heart of a lot of those. So just to reiterate the slide from earlier on about how important that is to us on a daily basis, whether that's written communication or verbal, really, that sets the foundation for everything we do on a daily basis. So very much a key aspect of town planning. But hopefully, yeah, we've stayed on allotted time, Tevin, and then I'll hand over to you for questions.
No, you absolutely have. Thank you for that. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Ben and Alan in the chat box down below? I'm quite curious to know, actually, Alan. If I recall correctly, you've been working in town planning for 10 years. Is that correct? More
or less, yeah.
I'm interested. How have you seen your role change since you first started?
Well, very much changed. Sort of, I suppose, coming out of university, you come out with a really good understanding of the sort of core issues, and from an academic perspective, you understand what the key issues of the day are and topics. But then it's only when you first get into work that you start to apply those on a daily basis to real life scenarios and projects. So going from school and university to then a graduate being taught how to use those skills on a daily basis, but then progressing through consultancy. I started as a graduate planner, then a planner, then a senior planner, and now an associate director. Ben is obviously a rung or two above me. So there's probably sort of 2 to 3, possibly 4-year intervals between those gateways almost, but it comes with experience of projects. It comes with exposures to clients and different types of local authorities and different types of issues. And then there's a lot of management that comes into play as well, and looking after new graduates now. So in my team at Lichfields, I have graduates that were doing exactly what I was doing 10 years ago. So now it's up to me to teach them and show them the ropes, and effectively, try to bring them on and teach them a bit of what I was taught 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Ben, and segueing on from that point, I'm quite interested to know what does a typical day at work look like for you? Is there a routine you follow, or was every day just completely different?
It's a very good question. I think days tend to be quite different. I mean, we spend a lot of time meeting with clients and meeting with design teams, working with architects. So there are various meetings. Obviously, at the moment, most, if not all of those meetings are virtual. So daily life has changed significantly in the last year, as it has for most people. But I mean, I would say a typical day is probably split into sort of three sort of thirds, I suppose. A third of my time is probably spent in meetings, either with planning officers talking about developments like South Kilburn, with design teams talking around design issues and working through those issues, or meeting with clients. Another third is probably spent sort of writing reports or reviewing reports that other members of my team have written. So a big part of my role is sort of overseeing the team's work and making sure that sort of quality control is in place, and the consistency of the work and the messaging and the narrative is in place. So I'd say probably another third is spent writing, and then the final third is probably sort of spent dealing with emails and management as well. So I mean, typically sort of pre-COVID, I would say I spent a third of my time out of the office in meetings, and probably 2/3 in the office, actually producing written work, reviewing written work, managing the team, and corresponding with clients. But there isn't a set routine. It's certainly not the same every day. It varies hugely. And I think the nature of what we do is really varied as well. So the types of projects we're working on are really quite varied. So we can work on anything really from small scale developments, sometimes involving individual houses or house extensions at really quite challenging, sensitive sites, historic buildings, listed buildings, through to major regeneration projects. So the largest thing that the team as a whole is working on, which Alan is managing, is the North Greenwich project, the Greenwich Peninsula, which is several thousand, best part of 15,000 homes, and is a project which will continue for 20 years. So in terms of sort of day-to-day work as a planning consultant and project work, it is enormously varied. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about it. It's constantly challenging, but always different in terms of the types of projects. So it's certainly not it's not regimented, and it's not the same every day.
I think just to add to that, Ben, I think for the benefit of everyone listening, certainly as a junior planner, more so pre-COVID, but I'm sure we'll get back to it, is an ability to get out and about and see different development sites. So whether that's new sites that come forward, you may get an inquiry about potential developments. You can go and have a walk around that local community, assess a site, see whether there's any trees on there, and where the roads are, where the crossings are, where the nearby buildings are and windows, making sure that any advice that you give about development potential of that site is accurate. As much as Google Earth is useful to us from a desktop perspective, it's always quite nice to get out and about and have a walk around. And that's the same middle way through a project and then at the end of a project. So you might go and check on the progress of a development once during construction, and then you may go and have a look at it when it opens as well, which is always quite nice, or at least an excuse to get out of the office once a week.
Absolutely. Thank you, gents. We have some questions coming in. What would you say are the top skills required for students to get a job these days? We find it varies from industry to industry, but could you give 3 examples of things that are important for your role and your industry?
Yeah, I'll have a go at that, Alan, and then you can chip in if that's okay. So it's a very good question. I mean, I think as Alan said, I think the planning industry for some time, or the planning sector for some time, there is a demand for graduates. So in terms of sort of employability and opportunities, I think prospects are very good compared to other industries. It's a growing industry, particularly in London. There's so much development happening. So in relative terms, I think it is a very good industry to get into if you're interested and get involved with. But obviously, that, like every other industry, there are challenges at the moment. In terms of the sort of top skills, I would say, in no particular order, report writing and written communication, as we've spoken about at length, is vitally important. So much of what we do is about written communication, writing planning statements and reports, communicating with clients and planning officers and other members of the team. The second point allied to that, I think, is team working, an ability to manage and brief and collaborate with a large team of architects and consultants and planning officers. As I mentioned, on a big complicated project like South Kilburn, we might be working with a team of architects and perhaps another 15 to 20 other consultants. So there's an ability to communicate effectively with those consultants, brief them effectively, and be able to manage that sort of team working and that nature of projects. And then I think the third thing from my perspective is probably sort of ability to analyze issues, so analytical skills and problem solving, an ability to identify quite a wide range of often challenging and conflicting technical issues. So on a site, you might be dealing with design issues associated with open space, providing amenity space and play space for the residents of a development. You might need to look at parking issues and cycle parking, things like refuse collection, rubbish collection, amenity impacts, so impacts of development on things like daylight and sunlight and privacy of neighbouring residents, and then also looking at the construction process and how that can be managed. So there's a really wide range of competing, challenging issues to navigate and balance during the planning application process. So an ability to identify those key issues, analyze the issues and come up with solutions and solve those problems, I think is probably the third issue. So I think, yeah, just in summary, written communication, I would say team working and sort of analytical skills and problem solving.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that, Tevin. I'd sort of jotted down reading and writing skills, critical analysis, but then creative thinking and problem solving. So a lot of what we do on a daily basis, because we manage a lot of these big teams, is finding the right door to go through, whether it's option A, B, or C. It's assessing and making decisions on a daily basis. So what are those solutions and which ones are the best ones for the project at that time?
Absolutely. And can you do an apprenticeship instead of going to university? Is that an option?
In terms of Lichfields, our graduates, so they're university graduates, so they'll do a university course. I think local authorities, there are alternative routes, so I think you can. I mean, typically, a career in planning requires good qualifications, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a university degree. So I think there are other alternative routes into local authorities. Generally, in the private sector, our graduates are university graduates, but I think things have changed, certainly in the public sector and within councils. So I think there is some flexibility there. Alan, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think certainly private consultancy tend to be graduates that have come through university, but certainly local authorities, councils, government, a lot of the house builders, there's certainly apprenticeship options there to join at 18, and actually you'll rotate for a couple of years doing different types of things. So whether that's actually out on a construction site for 6 months or in head office for 6 months. Similarly with local authorities, you might work in a regeneration department, or you'd go and work in a housing department, and yeah, that's not a prerequisite to have a degree, and they do have apprenticeship options available.
And I think there's a lot to be said. It's really positive to have that experience early in terms of actually working in the industry, because I think as Alan sort of intimated earlier, that there is a huge difference really between sort of the academic world and working in an office and working in consultancy or working for a local authority. So I think you certainly don't stop learning, and your career development certainly doesn't stop once you are a graduate or once you start work as a planner. I think one of the things I found many years ago when I started working at Lichfields actually is there is a big difference in terms of day-to-day working in reality in an office compared to doing a university degree, and the academic, the sort of academic background and the qualifications you have, which is very, very important, but at the same time, the sort of practicalities of working on a day-to-day basis on projects, and the reality of working with a team of consultants and clients and collaborating with planning departments, and also the sort of commercial reality of development is really very different, and you learn a lot more in that respect through actually just getting stuck into day-to-day work compared to the sort of academic stuff that you learn at university.
Yeah, so I think in that vein, any opportunities to get work experience as you continue through your studies, so whether that's at A level or university or whichever route you choose, if there's ever opportunity to get some work experience, whether it's a week, a month or 6 months, then I'd definitely recommend doing that. And certainly the graduates that arrive at Lichfields, the ones that are often sharper or more ready for the environment, are the ones who've had a little bit of experience in the real world, as well as that really good understanding from education as well.
On that note too, actually, speaking of work experience, on the 14th of July, we'll be hosting a Insight Day with Pollard, Thomas and Edwards at 5:30 p.m. You all hear about it, we will email you, but in the chat right now, I'll put a link to it. You're more than welcome to sign up quite early. And yeah, you'll have an opportunity to gain some work experience, which as Alan just echoed, is very vital, in pursuing for your career development. But still, thank you on behalf of Pathway CTM, Ben and Alan. Thank you all for joining the session. I'm aware that there's a lot of value being shared there. So yeah, again, I'm very much excited about the potential, people have after listening to that. So again, thank you all.
Thanks very much for your time. Hopefully that was useful, and yeah, that was it was good for us to go through that as well. We enjoyed it, so thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, gents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.